What if your desperate need to be seen as a quote-unquote good person is actually the ultimate proof that you don't really trust God at all?
Right. It's a heavy thought.
It is. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Today, we are bringing you, our listener, right into the psychological underbelly of how we worship.
Yeah, the stuff we don't usually want to talk about.
Exactly, because as a fellow learner who is just always hungry for the nuance behind the obvious stuff, I want to explore this deeply uncomfortable paradox with you today. Like, why are human beings absolutely terrified of keeping our faith, our charity, or just our good deeds a secret?
Well, we're dissecting a really profound theological and psychological essay today. It's titled Part 2, Utter Lack of Trust and Surrender.
Yeah?
And this text, it takes a very sharp scalpel to the hidden motives behind our public displays of morality.
It really does.
We perform these acts of charity, these loud public declarations of faith, ostensibly for a divine audience. But the source material argues that this behavior isn't actually about devotion at all.
No, not at all.
It's a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
The text literally refers to it as an insurance policy. The anxious soul is just frantically trying to establish.
Yeah, I love that analogy. It's like, think of a nervous employee who knows a massive performance review is coming up, right?
Oh, totally.
They're constantly gathering this meticulous binder of character references. Like, they are printing out every nice email a colleague has ever sent them.
Highlighting them.
Right. Desperately preparing to present it all to a CEO who, frankly, already knows exactly what they do every single day.
Yeah, the CEO sees everything anyway.
Exactly.
Right.
But we treat our faith like a public LinkedIn profile. We are trying to build what the text calls a file credit for Judgment Day. We want to point to this spreadsheet of our good deeds and say, look, right there, that's what I built. It's tangible.
Because documentation is just deeply comforting for the human ego.
Yeah.
We want our value to be quantifiable. We want it to be completely undeniable on paper.
Right, but why?
Well, the author really probes into the why behind that binder. Like, why do we feel this suffocating need to compile a file credit?
Yeah.
And the source points to a very specific hidden terror, which is the fear of the accuser.
Oh, wow. Satan.
In biblical terms, yes, Satan.
Yeah.
There is this subconscious dread that if our good deeds remain completely secret, the accuser might actually win the argument over our soul's final destination.
Because we essentially subconsciously treat heaven like a bureaucratic legal system.
We do.
We imagine Satan acting like this slick prosecuting attorney who might just, find a technical loophole in heaven's legal code.
Yeah, an administrative error.
Right. We think if the accuser files a motion to dismiss our soul, we're going to need 10 earthly character witnesses and a mountain of documented charity just to overrule him.
Which is wild because we fundamentally reduce God to a helpless judge who's somehow bound by Satan's red tape.
Exactly.
And the text points out that this anxiety is heavily fueled by a real misunderstanding of ancient scripture.
Yeah, talk about that because that's fascinating.
Well, people look at the story of Job, for instance, where Satan demanded to test him, right? To strip him of his wealth and his health. And the request was granted.
It was.
Or they look at the Gospel of Luke, where Jesus warns Peter that Satan has demanded to sift him like wheat.
Hold on, let's translate that ancient phrase for a second, because sifting like wheat sounds, I don't know, almost agricultural and benign.
It sounds like baking.
Right, but psychologically, sifting is a violent separation. It's the accuser demanding to tear Peter's ego apart, to violently shake him until his faith fails and only the chaff remains.
Exactly. And because the accuser's terrifying requests were actually granted in those biblical accounts, people internalize this really devastating logic.
They do.
They think, well, who is to say that a demand to bar me from heaven wouldn't also be granted on the day of judgment? We harbor this quiet panic that a lie from the accuser could successfully keep us out of eternity.
And so in the face of that panic, we strive to build this incredibly broad reputation as do-gooders.
A public record.
Yeah, a public record feels bulletproof. We assume that if we perform in the open, if we have enough retweets on our moral stances or enough literal plaques with our names on them, God can't possibly ignore our record.
And the accuser won't have a leg to stand on.
Exactly.
But the source text brings in a chilling counterargument to this entire strategy.
Oh, this part is so intense.
It really is. It highlights a prophecy from Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 7. People are arguing their case at the final judgment. They're literally pointing to their spectacular public works.
The binder.
Yes, the binder. You're saying, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name and cast out demons in your name and done many wonders in your name?
And the response they get is just the absolute collapse of the insurance policy.
Complete collapse.
Jesus says, I never knew you, depart from me. I mean, they built the perfect public resume. They had the ultimate LinkedIn profile of faith.
Fully endorsed by everyone in their community.
Right, but it lacked the one thing that actually mattered, a genuine private relationship.
So to you listening right now, just consider the architecture of your own life for a minute. Yeah. How often do you seek out a quote-unquote measurable impact purely to hear others speak well of you?
Wow.
We treat our peers as character references. We genuinely believe that if God lives within our brothers and sisters, their applause must carry significant weight in the heavenly courts.
But if we feel the need to build a massive public defense, it really reveals a fundamental flaw in how we view the being we are defending ourselves to.
It does.
Because, I mean, you only remind someone of your record if you think they're prone to forgetting it.
Right. We project our own human limitations, like our own amnesia, straight onto the divine.
Yeah.
And the source outlines two core spiritual struggles that cause this projection. The first is a perceived distance from God.
Okay, unpack that.
We tend to picture God as this king who is just far away in the cosmos. We treat him as common property who only deals with, massive crowds and geopolitical events.
Like he's too busy for us.
Exactly. So we assume he completely overlooks our individual private messes.
Right, because we imagine him so far away, managing billions of people, we think we need to wave our arms and make a lot of noise just to be seen.
That's it, exactly. And the second struggle the text identifies is an outright ignorance of God.
Meaning what?
Meaning we succumb to the notion that God actually makes mistakes or suffers from memory loss, that he needs our constant nudging to remember our devotion.
But wait, hold on. Let me play devil's advocate here based on the source text.
Go for it.
If treating God like he has amnesia or changes his mind is the core problem, how do we explain the book of Genesis?
Right.
Because the author acknowledges that the Bible itself sometimes portrays God in these exact terms. Like Genesis chapter 6 literally says God regretted making human beings.
Yeah, the language is right there.
And Abraham literally negotiates with God in Genesis chapter 18. He's arguing with him about not slaying the righteous with the wicked, pleading, shall not the judge of all the earth do right?
It's a real negotiation.
So if the ancient text explicitly says God changes his mind or regrets things, isn't our human logic completely justified in thinking we need to remind him of our goodness?
Such a good question. And the author addresses that contradiction directly. He points out that the profound danger lies in how we read the text.
Okay.
The error isn't that we use our human logic or our minds to interpret Scripture. The error is the direction of that logic.
So we're using the literal text to build the wrong ruler.
Exactly. We let a literal surface reading of a specific scriptural text redefine who God actually is, and we should be doing the exact opposite.
Yeah.
The known character of God, his omniscience, his sovereignty, his unchanging love. That must be the ruler we use to measure and interpret the text.
Oh, that makes sense.
So when Genesis says God regretted, instead of assuming God made a literal mistake like a human CEO who made a bad hire, we use the ruler of his perfect character to understand the text.
Right.
It's expressing the depth of divine grief using language that limited human minds can actually comprehend.
Okay, but because we get the direction of our logic backward, we completely invert how we practice our faith.
We really do.
Like, we try to make straightforward, literal commands symbolic, and then we treat symbolic, poetic texts as literal facts.
Yes.
For example, Jesus gives these incredibly literal commandments in the Sermon on the Mount about praying in secret, giving to the poor in secret, and not worrying about tomorrow.
Very practical stuff.
Right. But we treat those as, like, beautiful but unattainable metaphors.
Yeah, he didn't really mean that literally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we treat the ancient poetic language of God changing his mind as an empirical, legal reality that we have to strategize around.
The author calls this double-mindedness.
Double-mindedness. I like that.
And it blinds us to the reality of how God actually operates. Because we focus on massive public works to appease a God we think might forget us, we completely forget that God is secretly contending with everyone individually.
Individually.
Yeah, the text explicitly says he is contending with people whether they are in a church or a casino, whether they are awake or asleep.
Wow.
The author brings in this incredibly sobering quote from the prophet Hosea, chapter 4, verse 6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge.
And this lack of knowledge destroys the very thing we need most, which is our private prayer life.
Completely.
Because we think God is distant, and because we think he might forget about us if we don't have enough witnesses, we instinctively look for safety in numbers.
Yeah, crowdsourcing our faith.
Right. We don't trust God to answer us individually in the quiet of our own rooms. So what do? We rush out and share our most private struggles with everyone else. We turn our peers into intermediaries.
We essentially turn the church community into a lobbying firm.
A lobbying firm, yes.
We think, well, if I can get 50 people to pray for this specific outcome, God has to listen to the petition.
Like a spiritual petition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The more signatures I get on the spiritual clipboard, the more pressure I apply to the divine.
Which is so messed up, because under the guise of seeking quote-unquote prayer support, we divulge secrets, we overshare, and we completely compromise the privacy of our own homes. Yeah.
The text has a sharp critique for this, noting how we inadvertently build household gossip groups rather than true prayer groups.
It's so true, though.
We make idols out of our friends, relying on their collective voice instead of relying directly on God.
Because we outsource our vulnerability to the crowd. We're too terrified to be vulnerable with the divine in secret.
Yeah.
We try to twist God's arm. We predetermine the exact outcome we want. We rally the troops, and we demand that God basically rubber stamp our wishful thinking.
It is the exact opposite of the ultimate prayer of surrender modeled by Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Yet not my will, but yours be done.
Right. The source laments that we are so guided by our immediate anxieties that we remain entirely oblivious to what actually heals us.
And the author uses a phenomenal, visceral metaphor for this behavior.
Oh, the hospital one?
Yes, we have become hospital lunatics.
That's such a strong phrase.
It is. We are fragile patients, screaming and violently fighting the very doctor who is trying to save our lives. Because the doctor is administering the cure, and that cure might be incredibly painful.
It might look bad from our limited earthly perspective. It might involve loss or waiting or silence.
But it is exactly what we need to survive.
Yeah, but instead of trusting the doctor's science, we fight him. We call in all our friends to protest the treatment.
Because the patient thinks the chemotherapy is poison.
Exactly.
They don't understand the mechanism of the healing, so they marshal a lobbying firm to demand the doctor stop the treatment.
And fighting the doctor with every single injection takes an immense toll.
Oh, it's got to be exhausting.
It is. It's no wonder the author points out that this specific behavior is the root cause of modern spiritual burnout.
Yeah, spiritual exhaustion.
The essay describes this burnout as the rat race of the Christian life.
I feel like a lot of people can relate to that.
Oh, absolutely. We are trying to earn huge metaphorical salaries from our good deeds. It is a ledger-based faith.
A ledger-based faith.
Right. We keep meticulous, exhausting records to ensure our moral balance is always rising. We're terrified of ever slipping into the red and having to borrow grace.
Like we're going into spiritual debt.
Exactly. We want to buy our right of entry through the gates of heaven with our hard-earned file credit.
But, okay, let's talk about the alternative. Because if we burn the ledger, if we stop building the resume and let go of this need for public control and peer validation, aren't we just in a free fall?
It feels like it.
Right. What does actual surrender look like in the face of these massive, deeply ingrained anxieties of being forgotten?
Well, the source turns to ancient examples of what profound, terrifying trust actually requires.
Okay.
It asks a really hard question. Will we trust God to bring the soul down to the depths and raise it up again, if that is his hidden will?
Wow.
The text cites Psalm 71. You who have shown me great and severe troubles shall revive me again and bring me up again from the depths of the earth.
The author also points to the story of Jonah being sent into the heart of the sea, into Sheol.
Yes, and don't just think of a biblical whale when you hear Sheol.
What should we think of?
Think of the psychological terror of being completely stripped of your audience. Sheol represents utter darkness, total isolation.
Oh, wow.
It is the ultimate ego death. Jonah is in the depths of the ocean, completely alone. He has no public witnesses, no character references, and absolutely no ledger to save him.
He is entirely offline.
Exactly. He has lost all control over his narrative.
But God had mercy and raised him up again from that absolute darkness.
Yes.
And I guess if we don't believe God has the authority, and more importantly, the love to operate in our own personal fuel, we can never be honest with him.
We won't. We'll always keep up the charade.
We will just keep frantically polishing our public trophies, hoping the glare distracts him from our actual lack of trust.
That's beautifully put. And stepping off the treadmill of this ledger-based faith, it requires a radical shift in how we navigate our daily spiritual lives.
Okay, what are the practical steps here?
Well, it starts with the sheer mechanics of how you pray. You have to stop twisting the arm of the divine.
Meaning, like, no more demanding predetermined outcomes.
Right. Instead of going to God with a fully drafted contract, demanding that he fixes a situation exactly how you designed it, you practice praying for his hidden will to be done.
That's hard.
It's incredibly hard. It is moving from, God, give me this specific promotion so people know I am blessed, to, God, place me exactly where you need me, even if it looks like a demotion to everyone else.
Yeah, and that level of surrender naturally requires protecting your intimate space.
Oh, absolutely. That's the second step. Before you text your household gossip group or post a vague prayer request online to garner sympathy, you have to take your deepest, ugliest fears to God in secret first.
Cutting out the intermediaries.
Exactly. Let God be your primary confidant, not your last resort, when human validation fails to numb the anxiety.
And I assume when you protect that secret space, you inevitably begin to burn the ledger.
Yes, that's the third step.
Yeah.
You recognize the fundamental truth the text emphasizes. You cannot buy the gates of heaven with a file credit.
Because we have forgotten that the gates were never meant to be bought in the first place.
We are already opened.
Stop building a record and start resting in a relationship.
Yeah.
Because when you realize the accuser has no actual jurisdiction over a soul that has surrendered, and when you realize God isn't suffering from amnesia, the heavy burden of having to prove your worth publicly just evaporates.
It is a complete unraveling of the insurance policy. You no longer need the binder of references.
It's so freeing.
It really is.
Well, looking back at the journey we've taken today, it is wild to see how a hidden, almost subconscious fear of the accuser drives us to weaponize our public worship.
Yeah.
We misinterpret ancient scripture, projecting our own forgetfulness onto God, thinking we constantly need to remind him of our goodness.
And we fight the doctor who's trying to heal us.
Exactly. And we uncovered how letting go of our arm-twisting, ledger-based faith is the absolute only way out of the spiritual exhaustion of the modern rat race.
It's the only way.
To you, listening right now, the most comforting takeaway from this deep dive should be this. God does his most glorious, transformative work in secret, far away from the applause of the crowd, far away from the metrics, the LinkedIn profiles, and the binders of references.
Absolutely. And I want to leave you with this to just mull over.
Yeah.
Consider this. If God truly does his most profound work in the absolute dark, far away from any audience, maybe the spiritual dryness or the feeling of being completely unseen that you're experiencing right now isn't a punishment.
Wow.
Maybe it's the ultimate compliment. It means you are finally trusted enough to be treated in secret.